On the 26th of October 2024, Britain's Jack Catal beat America's Regis Prograis on points to move closer to a world title showdown. It was a bizarre and somewhat messy 12-round super lightweight affair, in which Catal sealed his win with two generous scores of 116 to 109 and one 117 to 110. I thought Catal, in his southpaw stance and landing impressive 1-2s down the pipe, demonstrated strong credentials for a world title shot. Nothing flashy, almost like a throwback to fighters from the 1940s, being static before attacking when needed. Regis fought valiantly, but the lowering of his hands and the wild swings provided ominous signs for his future career. As for Catal, having been robbed in his world title bout against Josh Taylor, this victory stands him in good stead, forcing himself into a future junior welterweight world title fight. But who's next?
We have Liam Paro fighting Richardson Hitchens December 7th in Puerto Rico. The winner of that fight, we want to put that straight forward to them to fight Jack Catal next. I would love to bring Teofimo Lopez to Manchester as well and give him a good arse kicking.
Although I rate Catal very highly and believe he can secure a multitude of world title belts, Lopez will be a different kettle of fish. He dominated Taylor easily last June and has proceeded to take belts off of Jermaine Ortiz and Steve Claggett since. Catal, if he wins his next bout against either Paro or Hitchens, certainly has a chance against the American, but while the British fans and press hype up the Chorley boxer, I cannot help but remember previous examples of British fighters falling short. Since ruining my reputation and credentials through suggesting Ben Whittaker could be the next Prince Nassim, I've done a lot of soul searching. In my introspective, borderline depressive state, I've decided to address a long established and fairly sensitive issue surrounding British boxing supporters. Do the British tend to severely overrate many of their boxers, or is it a justifiable reaction with the rest of the world underrating them? Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. But first, let's examine some salient examples of when British fighters have faltered when put to the test. A boxing scene forum from back in 2009 provides a fascinating insight into this question. At the time, the major British fighters being discussed were Ricky Hatton, David Haye, Amir Khan and Froch. The main crux of the debate was whether Brits overrated or Americans underrated British fighters, and the general consensus was a bit of both, it seemed. In a further boxing scene article prior to Hatton against Mayweather, TK Stewart noted, like Joe Calzaghe, Hatton is better than the majority of the American press gives him credit for. Hatton would further reiterate this before his fight with Mayweather, stating, "Nobody gave me a chance against two, not one. That just made me all the better. I just hope nobody picks me to win again." But, in classic style, the British newspaper The Daily Telegraph claimed that in the face-off, Hatton had gained the upper hand psychologically over Floyd, before suggesting that Hatton may have something to say. I feel the writer is insinuating there could be a potential Hatton upset on the cards. Prior to the fight, famous British boxing writer Gareth A. Davies wrote that more than £10 million is likely to be staked on Ricky Hatton beating Floyd Mayweather, perhaps showcasing how much the fans rated the Mancunian's chances. Now, we all know how the fight actually unfolded, but there really is no shame in losing to one of the best boxers ever, with his only other losses coming to Manny Pacquiao and Senchenko. Claiming he himself was overrated as a boxer is too harsh. But on this occasion, I do feel many of the British felt that he couldn't be touched by anyone, and that turned out to be very untrue. Amir Khan is another fascinating case study. There's certainly evidence to point the finger at Khan's own delusions regarding his skill, but I think this is somewhat a byproduct of years and years of being built up by the British media and fans.
Yeah, I would never quit. I'd rather get knocked out to win fights. You didn't quit?
Khan's bout against Colombia's Bradis Prescott was especially eye-opening in dampening excessive expectations. Before the bout, Khan's manager Frank Warren stated that everybody in Britain wants him to fight for the world title, but it wasn't the right time. With Khan suffering a 54-second knockout, this statement couldn't have been more accurate. The hype train had been dramatically derailed. His defensive frailties would be exposed time and again, with many dubbing him glass chin and pointing to his resume being full of feather-fisted fighters. As sad as it is to admit, I think Khan is a classic example of an overrated fighter who would falter whenever confronted by an A-list boxer. David Haye is perhaps trickier to determine. As a cruiserweight, he had some very notable victories, spanning from beating Jean-Marc Mormec on away soil to defeating Fragomeni somewhat unconvincingly. Yet once he moved into the heavyweight division, I feel his career took an underwhelming turn. Granted, he did beat the Russian giant Nikolai Valuev and absolutely smoked Chisora, which few have ever done, but was comfortably shut out by Vladimir Klitschko. He had natural power and decent speed, but as It's Over aptly noted, he was always a punch or so away from getting put on his arse. With a questionable chin, a somewhat shallow gas tank, and the constant obsession with trash talking as much as humanly possible.
Come and fight, don't hide, come and fight.
I can't.
Bring the fight. What are you hiding for? There's no need to hide behind these bums, these mandatory bums.
He was always destined to not make it to the very top of the heavyweight division, in my view at least. It's very unlikely he would have stood a chance against Fury also. I've actually met him in person, and to avoid my face getting rearranged if we run into each other again, I'll say under duress that he was a little bit underrated, and if he had stayed in the cruiserweight division longer, maybe it would have paid dividends. Perhaps the most confusing of them all to determine is Carl Froch. Now, from my research, the entire internet is incredibly divided over the Brit. Andre Ward, the man who convincingly handed him his second career loss, described Froch as an overachiever. I feel he was an example of a fighter who was largely unknown outside the country. Despite Froch being the WBC World Super Middle title holder at the time, America's Jermaine Taylor described how nobody knew of him in the States. To be honest, compared with others I've mentioned, he wasn't all that known in the UK either, bringing just 75 fans over for the fight against Glenn Johnson in Atlantic City. In light of two impressive wins against George Groves, one against Arthur Abraham and Lucien Butte, his credentials were evident, but Ward and Kessler losses highlighted that there were always bigger fish. So I'd say that he was actually marginally underrated, especially since not many people mention his career or his key attributes like an iron chin and ridiculous fitness levels. There are obviously many more recent examples which I'll look to cover in a future video, but I wanted to focus upon those who've retired as it provides us with a final picture of their careers. Regardless, please let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Also, why not subscribe while you're at it? Cheers.